Matt, welcome to the podcast. I think we have a lot to chat about today. I'm very, very excited for this.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Lewis. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to the conversation and fan of the show. So,
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
yeah.
I want to ask you, I was looking through your LinkedIn and you've had quite a long career in kind of these various domains of e-commerce, data and analytics. And then, you had quite a long career in terms of doing this for companies, but there was a certain point when you went independent.
Mhm.
What was the decision to go independent and how did you go about getting your first projects and clients, doing the skills you were doing professionally in a more traditional capacity on your own?
Oh, that's an interesting story, and one that I have both fond memories of as well as um, maybe a regret about, which I'll describe. I had consulted a little bit previously while employed, kind of doing some things on the side for companies here and there over the course of my career. But when I finally made the decision to go off on my own, I was about to change from one job to another. And I had a conversation with somebody who was asking me to do some freelance consulting work. And I was like, oh, listen, I don't really think that right now I can take the time to actually do that. I'm leaving one job and starting another, and it's going to be, craziness when I start a new job with the fire hose of information and learning a new company and these kinds of things. And that person was, gracious and understanding about that fact and said, well, hey, you ought to call a friend of ours and let him know that you're about to transition. And I was like, okay, great idea. So I know that the individual that he wanted me to connect with is like super busy. And so I was like, he's not going to pick up a call. He's probably in a meeting. I'm just going to text this guy and say, hey, just wanted to let you know I'm about to transition from one role to another. Thought it was important that you were aware so that, if you wanted to reach out or whatever that you could.
No, that's really interesting that how things turned out in terms of this unexpected text to that guy who was, a former boss. But is that now like a piece of advice that you give kind of standard to people, just like I imagine in the leadership position that you're in, that people come to you for career advice, kind of in the sense that I am as well. Is that like something that you now tell everyone that they should do? Like whenever you're changing jobs, whenever you're looking for jobs, just reach out to like old employers. Like what is that part of your procedure now that kind of, I know it wasn't on your radar to reach out to them in the first place, but now that it has happened, like now that is an experience you've had, is that something you think that you're prescriptive about?
I haven't had a lot of opportunities to recommend that to people. Or, did I ever think of doing it in the last job search that I was in? Simply with that individual, just because I didn't think, that their role would, provide that opportunity, but it wound up that it did. But in general, yeah, that's a great idea, right? To reach out to people that you've worked with in the past and let them know that you're transitioning or wanting to transition. And especially if they've moved on somewhere else as well, right? They know who you are. They know your working style. They know your skills and your strengths. And they're going to be able to either see if there's a place that they have for you or perhaps recommend something for you inside of another organization where they know there's a need that you could match for. Right. So yeah, that's a great thing to think of and do.
Is there any particular reason why you think he was right off the bat ready for you to come in as a consultant instead of just trying to hire you? Like was that his initial idea? So like actually just come work for me instead, but not in a traditional capacity.
Yeah. So the particular organization that individual works for, they work with a lot of external consulting organizations. And so it's a very regular practice for them. And that actually was a part of the conversation that it could mean that after a period of time that there would be an opportunity within his organization for me to work for them directly. However, between that, potentially occurring and the start of things, the fact that I joined Nibble Gravity happened, right? And so,
Okay.
that kind of, interrupted that opportunity perhaps to continue exploring the possibility of becoming a full-time employee for him at some point in time. Yeah.
That makes sense. Let's talk now about what Nimble Gravity is and what they do and how you kind of started there. Cause I think I understand it as it's a bit of an acqui-hire, but I don't fully know the situation.
Yeah. So I think that's a fair way of putting it. I'll back up and answer the first part of that question. Who is Nimble Gravity? What do we do? And the easiest way to put that is that we're a consultancy that's passionate about the power of data, and we work in several different spaces, and those are data science, e-commerce, digital transformation, analytics, engineering, and strategy. And as the head of practice for e-commerce and digital transformation, the conversation when I came into the business, and the fact has remained that is that it's my practice to run and to grow and to build and to make the decisions around when we should hire another resource, what jobs we should take on and not take on, and how to do everything as far as growing my individual practice goes. So it's remained highly similar to being, a solopreneur, or being, the CEO of your own business, the founder of your own business. What it's removed for me are things that weren't allowed to deal with anyway, quite honestly.
Back office.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, when you strike out on your own, there's all these things that you have to do, right? Like, you have to figure out, okay, well, do I need, small business insurance? How do I write an SOW? And what are all the sections that it needs? Do I have my own lawyer? What do I need to do about my own healthcare? And like all those kinds of things. And so by joining with a company that was already moving beyond those things and then hired some folks to kind of handle the back office stuff like you're talking about, it relieved some of that, entrepreneurial stress, quite honestly, from my life. And it's allowed me to focus a lot more on the things that I'm really good at. And that was part of my decision, right? Like, I'm versed in growing businesses. I know how to go out and do outreach and find clients and these kinds of things. And so that to me was a great appeal in why I actually wanted to go ahead and go through, joining forces. So, yeah.
Inside of your domain of expertise, like, what are the actual things that you like sit down and have client work that like you're most excited about? Like, this is like your highest type of contract. Like, a business that needs help with X is like, you're going to be the guy to jump in for that type of project within Nimble Gravity.
Yeah, that's a great question and a really interesting one. So the short answer is it all depends on the resources that are available at the time a client comes knocking, right? And whether we want to take on that work or not. So an example of that could be somebody comes and says, hey, we need hands-on keyboard for digital marketing help, and I need somebody setting up paid search campaigns and or Facebook, Instagram, Instacart, whatever it might be. And can you guys do that? And so then there's the kind of immediate processing in your head and realization of your resources, or maybe a moment where you're saying, yeah, let me go back and look at everything, and I'll reach back out to you with a proposal. And it's whatever it is you're doing some kind of resource review and understanding, what you have available. And if it were an important enough client and they came knocking for that digital marketing stuff, even though I have a couple people that could do that, if they were taxed and completely full with 40 hours worth of work, I would take it, right? I would still take it because I would have my personal capacity to give to that.
Yeah, we got separated by technical difficulties for half seconds. We're just going to jump this right in. I was saying how I love the market research part of marketing and the opportunities exploration part of marketing, and doing competitive analysis in terms of there's a whole checklist in terms of marketing strategies. There's something I actually discovered for my business, that one of the main problems that we want to solve, and maybe this is something we'll chat about for a few minutes after, is conversion APIs. We want to do conversion API configuration for people, basically kind of playing on the iOS 14 meta trends in terms of attribution and playing that game. And maybe I'll just have to get this set up before I release this episode, just so I get a few weeks to enjoy the arbitrage. But I just found out, right, that's there's absolutely no one bidding on how do I set up my Facebook conversion API on Google. And I'm that is exactly the type of project we want right now. And no one's bidding on that on Google. But I'm I can't stop all the other things I'm responsible for in terms of my outbound and my prospecting and my LinkedIn and the pipeline, the stuff in the proposal. But I'm I just found this. Someone go do that. Go set that up for me, please. Like that's the bids are cheap. Like go do that. And
Right.
it's really cool that like you basically can kind of have a brand come across your desk and like think about it and be like, these are like 8 things that you should probably be doing like right now. But I'm really good at that. And then I'm just really not good at like putting my butt in the chair and closing all the social media and the texts and like not being in brainstorm mode and like making a landing page, filming an ad. Well, I don't need to film an ad here, but writing ad copy, setting up Google Ads, like all the stuff like that. So that's really interesting.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun, and it poses interesting challenges too, right? Like you might find a keyword that a business you would think should be bidding on, and you're like, what's going on? Like, why is this candle business not bidding on beeswax, right? Like, it's just like you're a candle making supplies company that doesn't bid on beeswax. And so then you start have to asking yourself questions of like, well, what do they have going on budgetarily? Did they used to bid on that and they've cut it out because it spends too much, or it doesn't actually bring them customers, even though there are 15 other candle making supply companies bidding on it. Like you have to dig a little bit deeper. And sometimes you get the opportunity to, with diligence, where you do have access to the company or their analytics or whatever, and you can see historically what has happened. And other times you don't. And you might go into a scenario where then you're talking to them about value creation after the acquisition has occurred. And you come to find out, yeah, we killed our entire budget. And that's why you're not seeing us bidding on the keywords that, would make a lot of sense. And so that can then change the profile of what you're doing. But I think that execution thing that you're talking about is super interesting. And I had a conversation with another gentleman recently where he was like, most people don't execute. And that's the difference between people who, really grow something and those that don't. And it doesn't mean that you individually have to execute if you're an ideas guy, right? But you should partner yourself with somebody who is going to execute.
That's why, fortunately, my business partner does all the client work. So
there you go.
That's
right?
the good news, right? He finishes his to-do list every day. I add 25 things to my to-do list more than I started at the end of every day.
Yep.
It's like it grows over time, and his like consistently goes down to 0.
Yeah.
Different styles. But I need someone like him on the marketing team too.
Yeah, that's perfect. And we have people like that as well that go out and like we'll run through and do a UI UX audit, look at like 300 different things on somebody's website and create a whole list of things that they can do. And the company goes, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. Can you help us? And we say, you bet. And then we bring in, our developers, our programmers, our UI UX designers, those kinds of things, and put them to work and helping to carry forward from an audit point or something like that. Yeah.
Makes sense. In terms of the actual client acquisition piece of this business, I get the impression, right, that there's you and your other executive team, you're, like you said, industry veterans, decades of combined experience, likely many substantial jobs in these related positions. And then, of course, just what happens when you're on a team for several years, then everyone from that team goes to other companies and then remembers you're the expert. And that's kind of like a healthy inbound funnel. I was just going to say, what do you say to it, like a young person who's just kind of like, I have a lot of these skills now, but I don't have like the decades of experience in terms of like relationships. Like, do you still have like traditional outbound methods of acquiring clients? Is that still a big part of this business? And I guess also, how do you manage that with breadth? Because that's something that's been a big challenge for us that I'm sounding like isn't a challenge for you. Like, I feel like I've come to people and been like, anything digital, anything mark tech, anything data analytics, like, trust me, we can get it done. And for me, that's not like a compelling sales pitch because it's like, okay, I'm not going to take your word for it. Versus if, let's say they do HubSpot and I'm like, oh, I know I'm the HubSpot analytics expert. Here's a HubSpot dashboard I built. Look at this HubSpot stuff. And they're like, perfect. So let's get you hired. So how does your business like reconcile, in my opinion, it's not super appealing to be like, we do everything, because then people just don't really believe you. Because it's like, well, is that not a problem that you face? And then also like, how do you choose who to prospect for outbound when you say, we do these 6 different things?
Right. So typically in the sales process, I wouldn't talk about all 6 things, right? Like I'll describe the 6 things in a conversation like this or in a social gathering or something like that. But if I'm actually trying to do some prospecting and trying to sell and trying to win a new client, I'm talking to them about my practices. I'm talking to them about e-commerce or digital transformation. And I'll do that in the in the frame of understanding what they need, right? Like, I'm not going to talk to somebody who's running and operating highly digital business about digital transformation. I'm going to talk to them about e-commerce or growth marketing or those kinds of things, right? If it's a organization that is a little bit older, maybe they still do, 90% field sales and they're trying to grow their B2B e-commerce or whatever it might be. Then in that instance, we start talking about transformation and digital transformation and what we can do there. And same goes for like what we're doing prospecting wise, right? Like the message is if it's cold outreach, if it's an email or something like that, the message is very tailored to a practice and very tailored to the people that we're trying to reach, right? We're not going to the CEO and saying, hey, would you like to, pick one of these 6 things and work with us? We're going to the director of analytics and saying, hey, we noticed on your website that you don't even have Google Analytics 4 up and running yet. And guess what? In 4 months, it's going away. And the time to act is now to get that up and running and collect data on both platforms so you can make sure that you've got everything configured correctly. And we've done that for, 52 other clients. Can we help you out? Right. And very specific tailored message to those kinds of individuals. Then, to kind of rewind into your question a little bit around like network and these kinds of things, and how do you maybe grow it if you've got good knowledge and experience, but you don't have the years of building a huge network, right? So the first thing I'll say is, a big network is important in a consulting business, in any kind of services business, right? And unless you're very tailored or very much a, kind of generic accounting business or something like that could do outsourced accounting for any kind of business, right? So having that large network of contacts is fantastic. And any way you can build that is great. Can you build it doing podcasting and meeting people? Can you build it hosting events and getting connected with everybody? Can you build it going to events and being an active networker while you're at those events, not talking to the same people that you always talk to, not hanging out with coworkers, but really getting out and kind of introducing yourself and meeting others, right? So it is a critical thing, because in any consulting business or, a specialty services business, a lot of it does rely on relationships and referrals. You talk to any agency owner and a ton of their business comes in that way, right? And it comes from somebody they used to work with, somebody they know, somebody they worked with at one company that moved to another, like you said. So super important. And then what would I do as, a younger individual who's looking to grow a business and trying to prospect in all these different ways? Is I would test like crazy, right? And figure those things out. Like, we're honestly doing that. We're sponsoring networking groups. We're hosting parties. We are trying outreach across multiple practices. We're reaching out to our existing contacts in our networks and doing all of this. And I think that that's a really important thing. And then finally, kind of getting into the how do we then maybe move from one practice to another and kind of build what we do with an individual client? Is we're actively listening when we're in our conversations with a client, right? And we're figuring things out. Like if we're getting in and we're doing a UI UX analysis, some of the things that we're looking at directly relate to analytics, right? Are you capturing hover state information? Are you capturing scroll depth? Are you capturing, whether or not people that are visiting your site are coming in with an ad blocker? Like, what are all these kinds of things that might create different experiences, and what data do you have about them? And so that then gets us into a scenario where we might see the whole analytics stack and we can say, oh gosh, these guys have got some foundational challenges, or they don't have GA4 yet, or whatever it might be. And then we can talk to them about that. And it's kind of a land and expand approach from a selling format. And you can do that on any one of the businesses where you've built trust with somebody about what you're doing, but you have to go in with a singular point and then build out from there. Rarely do we get an engagement from a cold source that would be multiple practices. Those typically will only initiate in multiple practices if it's a warm referral or a past client, right?
That makes a ton of sense. That's been one of the lessons I've been learning. You could say the hard way, or the past several months, is basically, trying to sell like a retainer for what we want to sell, day one, right? Like the first emails, like, hey, most businesses like this one don't have this done well. Can we do it for you? And it's like a large project.
Yep.
What we've basically been realizing is like, no, we need to take that exact same strategy of like, this is one specific problem that we are almost certain. This is one fairly small, fairly straightforward, like couple week long project to fix, level specific problem you have, low ticket. And then literally the secret, whatever, right, is just getting behind the scenes of the business. Because one thing that's continuing to blow my mind, I think that one thing I think my generation or just young people don't realize in general is to the extent that a lot of the world is chaotic and disorganized, kind of like to the extent like every business, like what you're saying about the candle company with beeswax, like it is almost impossible that you're going to enter a business where you're not going to just find like a couple of things that are just seemingly unbelievable that they have not yet taken care of.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, I used to work for Mercedes-Benz, and like, what does the person think of when they hear Mercedes-Benz, right? They think like luxury, high tech, top class, whatever. And like, I worked at like the corporate headquarters there, and was very surprised to see like when I get there is like, I don't think they knew what a Google sheet was, you know what I mean? Or like,
right.
Everything was Excel. I mean, everything with the cars, tremendous, right? Like unbelievably high tech in terms of the manufacturing and tech. And that was amazing. But just in terms of like Mercedes-Benz, they're just like, printing out resumes, highlighting them, and like fast recruiting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it blows. And like every company I've gone on to work for has been still behind the scenes. Like, whoa, like someone's got this great curated whatever, but then behind the scenes, you're like, this specific piece is just like, really? And it's just because the complexity of the world is just so humongous, right? I mean, it's just like there's infinite things that a business could be doing that they just don't have the headspace to think about. Right. There's almost always some low-hanging fruit for improvement. Yeah. And especially when, again, if no one on this team is an analytics nerd or a marketing nerd or whatever, to the same extent that you are, specifically in that domain, you're just going to continue to find something. So that's what we've been learning is like you said, land and expand. I'm going to use that all the time now. New catchphrase, everybody. This is the moment where it entered my vocabulary. But getting behind the scenes, building trust with the business, having the win, and then being like, while we're here, let's discuss these ancillary things.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. It's super interesting. I found the same thing. Right. And then the other part of that is like being willing to partner within your own space too. Right. Like you and I were talking, and now I know that you do work in Looker. We don't do work in Looker. And, next time I have a client that says, hey, we need some Looker reports, guess who I'm going to ping in LinkedIn and say, hey, do you have capacity to help with this? Right. And then, maybe that turns into you run into somebody who needs help building an engineering team, and you haven't done that. And we have a bunch of times.
Capacity yet. We do not have people to tap.
Right. And so like you can help each other build your business that way and help even a client with something that doesn't necessarily sit within the realm of what your business does day to day, but you just got to be willing and not afraid that like, oh, they're going to steal the client or whatever, right? Like you just got to be a little bit brave and a little bit, friendly. So,
yeah, I'm in a mastermind of agency owners, and it's very similar persona to myself. Like most of them are pretty young guys, and one of the only technical firms in there, but there's so many businesses in there that do like the exact same thing. And, get on a call and like, because it's like a group coaching, group strategy type setup. Yeah. And like the first thing they say every like week, one day when we join is like, you need to learn the abundance mentality. Like that is just what you have to learn. Like there's just enough to go around for everybody. There's enough to, it's like, you're both trying to do HubSpot for early stage startups. It's like, how many clients do you have right now? 5? If I gave you 25 clients, would you be at capacity? Yes. okay, there's 2 of you here. So there's 50. How many well-funded early stage startups are there? I don't know, several thousand. It's like, guys, like,
Yeah.
it's a big enough pie, and like, you're going to help each other.
Yep.
And then I'm learning this. It's fun. I'm learning a lot from it.
Yeah. Nice.
So as far as like growth hacking, I know this is like specifically in your area of expertise. And I know when you're talking about e-commerce, that might be like a different definition than the kind of prototypical listener to this podcast has, because maybe that's like the Shopify dropshipping is what comes to mind for them. Whereas you might be like established brand that existed even before the internet in like e-commerce, for like, you're talking about the electronics company, which is like, 2.5 million SKUs. And that's a very different mental picture of e-commerce. So when I ask you this question, you can kind of contextualize it to what specifically, maybe it is broad. Like,
Sure.
What are the quick wins you usually find? Like when you are working with an e-commerce brand from like a growth consulting perspective, like what do you almost always see? It's like the quick checklist of like, I'm going to look at these things because there's probably opportunities hiding here, 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 and here.
Oh, yeah, sure. And I don't think that this matters, quite honestly, whether you're on Shopify, Squarespace, BigCommerce, Adobe, or whatever, like a homegrown platform, right? Like, don't think it matters. Like, some of the very first things I do, whether it's in a diligence process or whether it's like, if I were going to sit down and be the operator in a business, I'm going to go straight to pagespeed.web.dev and figure out, like, is this website passing core web vitals? And what performance challenges do they have? Like, how fast is the page loading? All of these kinds of things. And the reason I'm going to do that is twofold. One, improvements there improve your SEO because they are ranking factors for like page speed and these kinds of things. And that will drive more money. And then the other one of those factors is that just the user experience, like, of being faster leads to conversion rate increases. And that's a proven set of facts, research done by Deloitte and Google. Like, I'm not making that up. You increase your page speed by 100 milliseconds and you can get up to an 8% increase in your conversion rate. And so if you look at somebody whose page load speed is super slow and they have an opportunity to, increase by 500, 1,000, like whatever it might be, all of a sudden you're talking about massive potential impacts on your conversion rate, right? And the great thing about that is it'll immediately tell you, listen, you've got all of your images in the wrong format. They're all in old GIF and JPEG. And sorry, like, WebP is now the new format, or AVIF. And both of those will cut in half the image size, right? It'll tell you have blocking JavaScript, right? It'll immediately give you opportunities that you can go talk about with your product and engineering team and how they can go ahead and increase page speed. I'm also going to go look at the content structure of a website too and understand how that is set up. Because no matter how your content is set up and what your content is it product content? Is it, articles and white papers and things like that? You have to have that all surfaced well. And this is like a UI UX thing. It's a best practice not to have anything be more than 3 clicks away. Guess what? Also, spiders don't dig that deep into a website. They're not going to follow like 50 links to get to an article that you wrote 2 years ago that might be super relevant still if you don't have pagination, if you aren't surfacing it, or if you aren't interlinking it in other articles and making it very easy for either people or crawlers to get to. And I've literally seen both of those things. Like, I've seen people that have content 40 and 50 clicks deep, and not just like one company, like hundreds of companies. Yeah. Darn near every single company I look at, like, it's more likely that people are failing core web vitals and have some kind of speed and performance challenge than it is that they're passing and have a really high ranking, like, guaranteed, right? And then there's other things too that, like, this is going to go back to that execution comment that we were having, right? So look at SEO, and with SEO, there's more than 200 ranking factors, right? So if most people don't execute and you're working on your website and you're just like, we took care of the top 20, right? Like, we've got good URL structures. We've got good natural language. We've got good keywords. All of our technical SEO is going pretty well. Our page speed is good. Like, yeah, I'm not going to focus on these other things, right? Wrong. Like that's like you're leaving money on the table, right? Like that's an opportunity to move above somebody. So if you both have those 20 or those 50 ranking factors, addressed, the guy that goes and does 5 more or 10 more or the next 50 or whatever, that's the person that's going to rank higher on the page. And whether that's putting descriptions in your alt image tags, or it's going and disavowing bad backlinks, or whatever it might be, you've got to go do those things. And you've got to be willing, as either a business or an individual inside of a business, to dedicate your time to doing all those kinds of things. Yeah.
Where the value of a firm is saying, pointing them out and offering to see through a team that can get them done as well. It's like
totally.
So, yeah. No, that's really cool. And that was just, I think you had really detailed on like a small number of things there. And I'm sure there's like another laundry list. You're like, even just, just within SEO and just within site speed, there's like not infinite, but a long list of things that are almost guaranteed going to be quick wins if you go through like the entire checklist.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to plug myself, but I've got an article about the 10 things that I've seen the most.
Definitely plug the article. I mean, if someone's listening this far, it's because they are interested in this specific type of stuff. So they've got some solid context.
It's an article on, it's on my LinkedIn. It's on our website, nimblegravity.com. It's 10 things you can do to improve performance on your website. Essentially, that's not the exact title, but you'll find it if you look for it. And it's those things that I was just talking about. It's, being better at email programs. It's not falling into the trap of, hey, my customers aren't on that social platform. Guess what? Grandma is on TikTok. So like, she might not be 50% of the people that are there, or grandpa might not be, but whoever, like whatever demographic, whatever gender, whatever anything you're going after, they are on those platforms too. And don't discount them, because you're discounting an opportunity to make money.
Just people not appreciating the scale of the internet.
Totally.
Is what comes. That's like another fundamental kind of just like thing of modern entrepreneurship. I want to do a couple rapid fire bonus questions and then we'll wrap it up. Have you considered doing, and I'm going to impose the word micro, maybe it's inappropriate to use the word micro, but like micro digital private equity yourself, just because you have the skill sets, like perusing like a Flipbot or perusing like Empire Flippers, because you have this domain expertise, and like going through doing your own due diligence and buying and flipping websites that do have like solid fundamentals with like an easy like 2 to 3 weekends worth of quick wins to just like buy and flip or hold as like a passive asset. Because I know that's like a popular thing that people do. And
yeah, I have looked at that in the past. It's never been something that I felt like I could turn a huge profit at unless I dedicated myself to it, right? Like, and for free time kind of stuff, I don't think I'm going to focus on that versus, and this is me individually, like I'd rather be out in the mountains playing soccer, doing something with my family, but it's a great strategy, totally viable, and tons of places to do it. I just haven't considered that as something for me.
We've considered it and you prioritized other things.
Sure.
Basically.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. We discussed at the very beginning, and we started out with a very serendipitous story, but I'm curious if there's like an additional one in terms of like an unexpected, whether it's like, let's constrain it to like a breakfast meeting, like an AM appointment that unexpectedly ended up being really transformational or important. Like you met someone and they ended up being key, like kind of just started out as like a innocuous, like there was no build up to it. It's just like, a random breakfast that ended up being substantially important or interesting and like altering the course of a path.
Yeah. I don't know if there was a breakfast or anything. Coffee. Yeah. Anything like that. I'm trying to think of a moment that occurred like that. And for me individually, it wasn't necessarily with another person. It was during a job transition. And it was when I was moving from Cricket Wireless to Aero Electronics. I had been a senior manager while I was at Cricket, and I'd gotten passed over for a director position. They gave it to another senior manager in our group. And it wasn't for any real reason other than probably relationship, quite honestly, because we were both skilled in different areas. I was a little bit probably more skilled in the exact role that was being given. but I hadn't been at the company that long. The other individual had. And, you know, if the other individual happens to be listening, she did a fabulous job in her position and was by all means the right person for it, right? Like there wasn't anything ill will there or anything. But I kind of made a decision after I left Cricket and while I was moving into Era that I was going to work on building relationships, one, to be stronger, and two, that I was going to not hold myself back. Like I wasn't going to edit myself. I was going to say what I really thought of things. I was going to be opinionated. I wasn't going to be kind of a super reserved individual that I had been. And that moment for me, I think accelerated my career quite a bit, right? When I made that decision to behave in a little bit different way and to focus more on the relationship aspects and work versus just the, hey, I do a good job and I execute well and that's all I need to do for this company, right?
Yeah.
And great moment for me.
Yeah, I can't think of a better word, but I guess like, I don't want to say childish, but in terms of like, it's like such an easy and seductive belief to be like, the most important thing is merit. And
right.
It's a very seductive belief because it's super logical and it's super easy and it's super simple. The most important thing is merit. I'm the best at this thing, but that's just doesn't map to reality really well. Well, like it just doesn't map accurately. That's just not, maybe there's like a couple companies of like, I don't know, like finance, maybe. I'm still making it up though. I think like it's hard to think of a situation where you're going to be not well served by not just being like, I'm the IC, I'm the best individual contributor on this team. Nothing else matters.
Totally. It's those SEO ranking factors, right? Like it's your personal, it's your personal SEO. If you both execute really well, but that other person's built more relationships, guess who wins? The other person.
Like, yeah. One thing I think about with SEO is like book summaries, right? Because I have a couple articles that rank and that's something I've looked up frequently. That was like one of the first things that I was caring about when I like also was learning about SEO. And it's like all the same guys rank for the first 5 books.
Right.
It's like you look up, I don't know, let's look at this bookshelf, a super popular book like Atomic Habits. Atomic Habits book summary, right? I'm not like the first 5 are the first 5. I'm looking at all of them and I'm going to pick the guy like I have the relationship with.
Totally.
And by relationship with, I mean like I've read his reviews in the past and I know they're good. You know, they're all good. They're all on the first page. They all did everything right. It's just so to try to extend the metaphor.
Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, I think good final question here. If you're like at the beginning of your career and there's like a subset or like a specific skill to start out with among all of your skills, or like you're going to build expertise. So it's like, what would you say would be like the highest value to learn from the outset? Would it be, and I'm just going to give some sample options. You can give something completely separate as well. But would it be like marketing and ad buying and copywriting? It's like actually the creative, like being able to like generate creative. Would it be the analytics? Would it be like the technical? So like the GA4, the programming, the site tagging, the like actual developer work, or like in the sphere of like your practice, or would it be, I guess, the keyword research and strategy, or would there be some other thing? Like where would you start first?
Yeah. So I'll give you 2 different answers. From just like a pure technical skill standpoint, what I would say, you should either pick analytics or paid performance marketing of some kind, whether that's paid search, Google ads, or social commerce, social advertising, that kind of thing, because I think they're going to give you a great foundation in what really impacts like an e-commerce business and how they drive growth, and it'll be a lot of fun and give you an area of specialty. But the other piece of advice that I would give somebody in that stage of their career is really truly learn what your boss cares about and what they are driven by, and also who your bosses are and what they care about, right? Like in an entry-level position, you probably aren't frequently thinking about the CEO of a public company cares about earnings per share because he's got to go talk to the board and the stockholders about that. And how is what you're going to do going to impact earnings per share and make it better, right? And you aren't going to know what the CFO wants or, the director of finance wants. And you need to learn those things. And I think far too often you find people who have moved up in their career over time who don't understand their audience when they're trying to sell something in as an initiative, or when they're asking for, budget to go launch a new program. Like they don't talk in the ways that really sell that to a C-level executive. And understanding those kinds of drivers, the earlier in your career that you can, will be more and more important, I think, as we go into the future and start working with machines that can do a lot of the things that humans can. So you gotta figure out how you can continue to add value, and understanding what those things are, and then being able to think of solutions around them is going to keep you in the game.
I think those are two great answers. Matt, where can people find you? I know you probably have more than just this one essay, I imagine. If there's like additional writing and resources, then as well the company, if there is an interest in exploring and learning more about that.
Yeah, the two easiest ways to find out about me and the company are both either the website, www.nimblegravity.com, or LinkedIn. Obviously, the company's there and I'm there as Matt Ranta, and I'm more than happy to connect with folks. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate the opportunity, and look forward to hearing all the shows after this.